Hello, friends and neighbors. Welcome to the neighborhood where people choose to smile. It's a beautiful day, won't you stay for a while? Happy in this beauty wood, it's neighborly and kind. Of all the neighbors in the world, I'm happy that you're mine. Let's make the most of this beautiful day. While we're together, we'll laugh and we'll play. Won't you be my neighbor today? Hello, friends and neighbors. It is a beautiful day. Thank you so much for choosing to spend some time with me in my neighborhood today. We have a lot to talk about, but before we do, let's say hi to Tommy the turtle. Hello, Tommy. He looks pretty hungry. Boop, 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 boop. Okay, today we are going to talk about families, and we're going to talk about space. Outer space, like up above the clouds where rocket ships go. Do you like space? I've always been fascinated with space exploration, and there's some really cool things going on right now. And I have a friend that I can't wait for you to meet who loves space exploration just as much, if not more, than I do. So let's jump right in. So we're going to start by talking about family. And this morning I drew a family tree. Have you ever seen a family tree? It doesn't really look like a tree that grows outside exactly, but here is my family tree, and it's not complete. I just put the people on there that are sort of important for what we're going to talk about today. I need a much larger piece of paper if I was going to make a complete family tree. And honestly, it's really hard to make a complete family tree because we can't always trace our family ancestry all the way back to the beginning. So maybe you have a family tree like this, or maybe you could make one. Let me bring it a little closer so you can see it. So here's me in this dark box, and I'm kind of there in the middle because this family tree is my family tree. And so here's my sister, and then my wife is over here, and you can see my wife and I are connected, and there's space for our children down here. And then my sister and I, we're connected in a different way, because we are siblings. We're brother and sister from my parents, our mom and our dad. And then that goes up, and here's my mom's side and space for her brothers and her mother and father, who are my grandfather and my grandmother, and then my dad, and space for his sister and his father, my grandfather, and his mother, my grandmother, and then it goes back to their parents, which would be my great-grandparents, and it can go, on and on. And it'll get bigger as our family gets bigger, as my children have children. Then they will grow this way, and it might grow this way too as my cousins have children and that sort of thing. And maybe you have a family tree, or if you don't, it's a fun thing to create. You can ask your parents and about your relatives, and you can start to put them down on a piece of paper. But today, we're going to talk about this gentleman right here in the red circle, my father's father, my grandfather, on my father's side. I have a picture of him. Let me show you. So here is a picture of my grandfather on my dad's side. So it's my dad's father. And his name was Martin Leister. And they called him Marty. I don't remember him really well. I remember him, but he died when I was pretty young. So I don't have great memories of him. But he did some really cool things. He worked in a steel mill, and he was a steel miller, which means that he would cut things out of steel. And steel is a type of metal. He would use machines to carve things and cut things and shape things out of steel. And he was pretty good at it. And he worked at a place close to Washington, D.C., outside, sort of between Baltimore and Washington, D.C. It was called Glen L. Martin. It's now called Martin Marietta. And because of where he worked, geographically, because of the location where he worked, he ended up having the opportunity to work on a spaceship. wasn't on the spaceship. He worked on parts that went on to the spacecraft or the spaceship. He worked on what's called the Gemini spacecraft back in the 1960s, a long time ago. And he helped to make the what we would think of as like the dashboard. It was the piece that held all the instruments, or the pieces that held all the instruments in the spacecraft. And you think about space exploration, and when I think about that, I think about astronauts, and I think about the people at mission control sitting behind all the computers. But what I don't always think about are the people who are creating all of the pieces. The scientists and the engineers that design everything, and then the people like my grandfather who actually manufacture or create the pieces. So there's a whole lot of people and a whole lot of things that go into making a spacecraft. I have a picture of one of the Gemini spacecrafts. Now this picture comes from the NASA website, and it's really cool. You go on the NASA website and you can find pictures of everything that they've ever done. And so this is the Gemini spacecraft. It would have been on top of a rocket, and there are 2 astronauts up in the black portion of this, and the part that my grandfather worked on would have been in the black portion there as well. Have you ever pretended that you were an astronaut, pretended that you were in a spaceship? I know when I was little, whenever I would get a big cardboard box, I would turn it into a spaceship. And even when my kids were little, we'd get a big cardboard box and I'd help them turn it into a spaceship, and we'd pretend that we were astronauts, and we would draw the dials and the buttons, and sometimes we'd even put cardboard switches and buttons in there. And I loved to pretend that I'm an astronaut. Did you know that right now at the International Space Station there are astronauts, and there have been astronauts there for quite a number of years? But right now, something new happened. A company called SpaceX, they have a rocket called the Falcon 9, and they built a capsule, sort of like the Gemini space capsule or spacecraft, that sat on top of that Falcon 9 rocket. It was called the Crew Dragon capsule, and that capsule carried 2 astronauts, Robert and Doug, to the International Space Station, and they are currently up there orbiting the Earth with several other astronauts. They're learning things and studying things, and they'll be coming back to Earth in several months. And that happened on May the 30th of this year, and I decided that I wanted to make something. I wanted to create something to remember that, because that's a big moment. That was the first time that SpaceX and these rockets is the first time that they sent people into space. So it's like a brand new thing. We've been sending people into space for a long time, but this is the first time we've used these rockets and this capsule to take people there. And so let me show you what I created here. I built this little rocket. I just took some pieces of wood and glued them together, and then I decided to paint them, and I decided to put the date 5 for May and 30 and 20 for 2020, because I wanted to remember that day. I got to watch it through the internet, and I got to watch the launch, and I was very excited about it. Now I have a friend. His name is Sam, and he is just as excited about space exploration and rocketry as I am, and he does something that I don't do. He builds model rockets and launches them up into the air, and he has invited us to come join him and launch some rockets. So what do you say? Let's go. Okay, friends and neighbors, here we are out in this beautiful field, and we found my friend Mr. Sam, and he's got a rocket. Sam, how are you?
I'm doing well, Monte. It's good to see you today. Thanks for coming out.
I'd like you to know my friends and neighbors.
Neighbors, how you doing? It's good to have you out here today too, and I'm looking forward to shooting off a rocket and talking a little bit about rocketry with you.
So Sam, can you tell us, how did you first get interested in rocketry?
I remember asking my dad, who's the one who taught me how to make models. And I asked my dad, I said, Daddy, how did you get into rocketry? And he said he was going to his violin lesson of all things when he was a little kid. And he said that while he was waiting for his teacher to finish up, he saw an old rocket catalog sitting on the desk, and he opened it up, and he got really excited about the space program and what it might look like to actually fly models. And he learned everything he knew from my grandfather, who also liked to build models. My grandfather likes to build model airplanes. And so between airplanes and rockets, we've been building models for quite a long time.
That's an explosive violin lesson.
I don't think he remembered anything that happened at the violin lesson, but we're still talking about rockets.
Yes, we are. So this rocket that you're holding here, this looks like it might be a scale model. Is that correct?
It is a scale model, and so this is a replica, or it's supposed to look like an actual rocket that was used in our space program. This one is called the Mercury Redstone.
Okay. And so there was several Mercury Redstones, right?
Correct.
And this one is which one?
This one is the fourth one that they shot up. Slowly and surely, they were trying to figure out how to get this capsule into space, and so they were running different tests. And this rocket is actually the first one of the Mercury program that actually had an astronaut that was in the capsule.
Okay, so when you say capsule, you're talking about this little black piece on top. Correct?
Yes, yeah, I can take it off for you. So it's this black piece that also has this little red piece on top. This is the part that actually carried the astronaut while they were in space.
Okay, and so the rest of that is just the rocket or the rocket booster that would get that capsule out of the atmosphere into space.
Correct. So this was all full of propellant and full of electronics that were intended to get the rocket off the Earth's surface and ultimately into space. That's correct.
Excellent. And so how would the astronauts get in the capsule? I mean, I'm pretty sure they didn't climb up through the rocket.
They did not. No, you wouldn't want to do that. So they would have a huge tower, and you could go and look this up. They have this huge tower that would have ladders and ways to get up, and so they would climb up slowly and surely. And then if you were really up close, there actually is a little door here. You can't open it, but there's a way that there's a door that's it's in the plastic, and they would climb inside, and they would literally be sitting on top of tons of propellant here, waiting to go to space.
Wow. I know you can see some of those capsules in the Smithsonian museums.
You can.
I'm not sure if they have a Gemini, but I know that they have capsules that have been in space. And I don't know about you, but I love when I can stand next to something that has been in outer space. There's just something special about that.
It's really cool. Yeah, to go to museums and see the various machines that have taken us to space. Unfortunately, you can't see this one because when it landed, there was actually a problem with the capsule. The door that was supposed to let him out blew a little too early after it had landed in the ocean.
Okay.
Because the door blew off, water came in, and actually the astronaut was lucky to escape, but the capsule is currently sitting at the bottom of the ocean. So you can't see this one.
The capsule is a coral reef, I guess.
It is indeed.
All right. So I watched a launch recently, and it was just the end of May 30th, I believe, this year, and they sent two astronauts, Doug and Bob. I can't remember their last names. They went to they're currently at the International Space Station, and that was a SpaceX rocket that took them up. And I noticed that rocket was the booster was able to come back and land.
Yes.
But they just fell away and they were done, right? They weren't reused?
Correct. So to build a rocket like this to get off the Earth's surface costs an awful lot amount of money.
I'm certain that it does.
So if you can save this part and reuse it, you save money for more exploration. And so what SpaceX is trying to do in partnership with NASA is to try to figure out how we can recover all of this so that we can use it for other space flights. And so one of the cool things about the SpaceX flight was that they actually were able to retrieve it. There was still propellant that brought it back to the Earth safely. They could recover it, and now they can use it for further launches.
That's fantastic. It kind of blows me away, just where the technologies come from and where we are today.
Yes.
All right, well, let's light this thing up. How do we launch this? What do we do?
This is always the fun part. Yeah, let's put it into the air. And so Caleb has some materials that we need, but I'm going to pull this off just to show you real quick about how we're going to get this up and then how we're going to get it back. Okay. That's one of the cool things about rocketry. You always want to get your rocket back if you can.
Sure.
And so what Caleb has
Now this is your son Caleb?
This is Caleb, yeah.
So we've got a fourth generation into rocketry here.
That's right.
You learned from your father, who learned from your grandfather, and you're sharing it with your kids. That's amazing.
And he's better than all of us.
Awesome.
So he's the best builder out of all of us. And so, yeah, so what we have here is what are called engines. And so this is the propellant. We're going to put that in the bottom here. All right, we're also going to put some protective material down in here. Rocket builders call it wadding. Okay, so that it doesn't melt the parachute, so it protects it from all the heat. And then this is the parachute that after the engine has finished its job, this nose cone's going to pop off, the parachute's going to come out, and the parachute is going to return it safely to land.
Wonderful. Well, let's go pack it, I guess.
Let's pack it.
We'll shoot it into the air.
Alrighty.
Okay, Sam, so show us how we pack this rocket, get it ready to go.
Yeah, this is pretty simple. So here we have an engine. Engines come in all kinds of sizes. Today it's a little windy, and so we're using a smaller engine so it doesn't go quite as high.
So it'll be easier to find.
Exactly. Hopefully we get it back. All right, and so we're going to put that in the bottom of the rocket. All right, and then we have something that is called an igniter or a starter. And we're actually, this is what is going to connect to an electric source. This is what is going to light, that is going to light the engine. Okay. So we're going to stick it in here, and then Caleb's got a little plastic plug that holds it in there so that doesn't happen. So we're going to put the igniter in. We're going to take the plug and just put it right in the hole there. And that'll hold the engine in. And then,
so you mentioned electricity.
Yes.
So we're using electricity from a battery, I assume?
Yes. So our stand here is attached to. It's got just a little. This is the button. This is the button we'll push to launch it. Yeah, it's just battery. It's just a little bit of electricity that makes the end of the igniter spark, and then when it sparks, the engine is off and running.
Excellent.
And then because we are dealing with fire, we're dealing with things that get hot. Again, we want to make sure that we protect this plastic, because if this melts, the rocket's coming down in a straight line, and that's not what we want. And so this wadding, it looks like a Kleenex, but it actually won't light on fire.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, which is not what we don't want anything lighting on fire today. Now this is a big rocket, so we're going to want to put a lot in it. All right, we're just going to shove that down. Here, just give me. Actually, you know what? That should be enough. Now we're going to take a pencil. Just make sure we get it down in there because my fingers aren't long enough. All right, and then we're just about ready for launch, so I'm going to take this and we're going to roll it up so that it'll fit in there. Then we're going to take what are called shroud lines, which hold the parachute to what's called the nose cone. We're going to roll that up, and then this big rubber band, it really is a stretchy rubber band. It's called the shock cord. So when it comes out, this has a little bit of give so that when
so nothing breaks.
Yeah, so when it blows, you don't end up with your nose cone in one place and your rocket in another. And it should be set for launch.
Excellent. Well, let's launch.
Let's do it. So we're hooked up and ready for launch. We've got our connector that's hooked it up to the igniter, which is inside the rocket.
So this wire is going to take our current over there to the
wire
rocket?
goes all the way to the rocket.
Okay.
All right, and because we are launching things, we want to make sure that we are safe at all times when we do this. So our launch thing has a safety key. We have to put the safety key in order for it to launch. We're going to push that down. The light's going to come on, which tells us we're ready to go, which means we're going to count down.
So you can't accidentally bump it.
You can't accidentally launch it, yeah.
Okay, that's good.
So, which is always good. Safety first, always. And so we've got the safety in, the light is on, so we're going to count down from 5, Mr. Monte. Here we go.
Let's do it.
All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, Sam, so we have a second rocket here. Now this one doesn't look like anything that I've ever seen us launch.
Yes, because this one wasn't designed by NASA.
Okay.
So one of the cool things about rocketry is that you can build rockets that look like anything you want. And so so there's a whole class of rockets that are just sport models, and you can paint them whatever color you want. They're a lot of fun to make.
Awesome. So what's special about this rocket?
So this one is special to me because it's one of the first that I remember my dad actually building. And I had always wanted to build it. I don't remember it ever being shot off, but I remember going through an old 1980s catalog, kind of like my dad did,
your dad.
And saw this rocket and thought it was really, really cool. The problem is back in 1980 it was a lot smaller, and I was like, I want to make it bigger, more color, bolder decals and everything. And so this is the first one that I've ever used a computer program to actually scale it up so that all the angles and all the sizes were right so that it would be safe. So this one is larger than the original model, and I'm very excited to fire it off.
Have you fired this before?
Never have.
So we don't really know what's going to happen.
We have no idea.
I kind of love that because it kind of reminds me of early space program. And even today, when they do something new, there's a lot of science behind it. There's a lot of work that goes into it. There's a lot of checks and tests. But when it really comes to firing that first rocket, they don't know what's going to happen.
You never know until it goes, yeah.
Well, I'm excited. And you mentioned to me earlier that nose cone.
Yeah.
That nose cone belonged to your dad?
And so this is what makes me feel good about this model, is that yes, I was building this and I was having trouble getting the paint on it right, and the paint had all crinkled on the nose cone that I had on it. And so I called my dad. I said, hey, do you have anything in your box? And he said, I sure do. And so he brought me over a nose cone from one of his old models that he hasn't flown in 20, 30 years. And so
what a cool family connection.
So we sanded it down, cleaned it up, popped it on there, and it is ready to go. So
awesome. Well, let's put it up in the air.
Let's do it. All right, it's set and ready.
All right, let's count it down.
Let's do it. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Sam, thank you so much for spending some time with us today and helping us learn about rocketry and launching some rockets. It's been so much fun.
Thank you, and thank you to your friends and neighbors who have come and hung out a little bit. This is something I love to do. It's a great thing to do when you're stuck inside, and so to come outside and to launch them off with you has been a real joy. So thank you, and thank you all as well.
Well, thanks again so much for sharing some time with us today and sharing your love of rocketry.
You got it.
Wow, that was awesome. It was so much fun seeing Sam and launching some rockets. What a great thing to do, and what a beautiful day to do it on. It's so cool that we can build model rockets that look just like the ones that NASA launched, and then we can build what Sam called sport models. You can make them look like anything you want. And it's amazing to me to think that there have been astronauts up in the International Space Station since November 2nd of the year 2000. That means that for almost the last 20 years, not every human being has been on Earth. There has been someone living in the International Space Station since November 2nd, the year 2000. No one has been there that entire time, but there has always been someone in the space station since then. What an amazing time we live in, that people can survive for a long term in outer space. Model rockets, so much fun. Maybe you could build some with your parents or your grandparents even, and then take all the safety checks and make sure you're doing it safely, but then go out and launch them on a beautiful day and up into the sky, and the parachutes will come out, and you can catch them and bring them back and do it all over again. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you've had a wonderful time. Let's sing our goodbye song. Goodbye for now. Take care, my friends. Goodbye for now. I'll see you again. Let's all be good listeners. Let's lend a helping hand. Let's make the world better. Together we can. Goodbye.